Okay, this is part 23 of Federalist number 10. We only went through a few sentences in the last part because these are very important sentences that he says. So he said the effect of the first difference is, on the one hand, to refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern. Discern means separate. To be able to say the difference between the true interest of their country and also people whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary and partial considerations. Temporary, not long term, and partial means just a part of a subject, not the whole subject, but only part. So he says we don't want people that will only look at part of what is important. They got to look at the whole picture. So he says that's the kind of people we want to elect. That's why we have chosen in this Constitution a Republican form of government, because we want to have representatives, and these representatives are going to be wise and thinking in the long-term interest of all of us, the country, and the next generations. Okay, I'll continue. Excuse me. Under such a regulation, it may well happen that the public voice pronounced by representatives of the people will be more consonant to the public good than if pronounced by the people themselves convened for the purpose. So he says, this way, we know that the decisions that are made are going to be consonant. They're going to be of really matching what's in the best interest of the people. They're going to be true to the interest of people, rather than these people establishing their government like a pure democracy. In other words, rather than these people every day going up to the center of town and voting on something themselves. Because when they do that, all they'll be thinking about is what is important to their town, rather than what's important to them in their state they live in, or what's going to be important to their kids, and what happens in the legislation they pass in the surrounding states. So they're going to be thinking only short term if we live in a pure democracy. But in a republic, when you extend the sphere of representation, in other words, when you have to choose somebody that represents this whole area rather than just one part, you are making a better decision for your long term. So that's what he's reminding us. And he says, on the other hand, the effect may be inverted. So if you just go with pure democracy, instead of getting a long-term interest, what's best for you in the long term, you get the short-term interest. You get the opposite. It says inverted. It means you get the other side. Men of factious tempers, of local prejudices, of sinister designs, may by intrigue, by corruption, or by other means first obtain the suffrages and then betray the interests of the people. So when you go with only a small district, the people that you might know, but those same people might easily fool you. Get your vote. Suffrage means vote. They might play tricks on you, have sinister designs. They say, if you vote for me, I'll do this for you, I'll do that for you, and you know that they're probably lying to you because all they want to do is get in the office, get elected, and then fill their own pockets with money. They're not thinking about your long-term interest. So he says that is a possibility. If you go with a short area, with a small area, instead of a enlarged area where you can find refined characters, very wise people to represent you. And it's harder to corrupt them, he says. Okay, we'll continue. The question resulting is whether small or extensive republics are most favorable to the election of proper guardians of the public weal. So again, he puts the question, he says, then one question, if you don't believe me so far, is whether a small republic or a larger one, or small area or a larger one, is a good way of deciding where your representatives come from. That they will do the right thing for the public. Public weal, what's best for the public. And it is clearly decided in favor of the latter by two obvious considerations. And he says, it's obvious that it's best if you choose a larger area to get your representatives from than a small area. Okay, it continues. In the first place, it is to be remarked that however small the republic may be, the representatives must be raised to a certain number in order to guard against the cabals of the few. So you want to make sure that the area is large enough where a few tricky people, a few people with sinister designs, a few people who don't have the good of the country in mind, but the good of their own pockets, their self-interest, that they don't have a way of ruining the elections, of finding bad people to be your representatives. And that however large it may be, they must be limited to a certain number in order to guard against confusion of a multitude. So he says the other side of the coin, the other side of this problem is that we don't want the area, number one, to be too small. The area, the district that we choose our representatives from, to be too small so that we are only stuck with bad people or people with that look for your short-term interest. And we don't want it to be too big where you can't even know who to choose. Okay, so he says we have to find a happy medium. Hence, the number of representatives in the two cases not being in proportion to that of the constituents and being proportionally greatest in the small republic, it follows that if the proportion of fit characters be not less in the large than in the small republic, the former will present a greater option and consequently a greater probability of a fit choice. So he's again saying, as long as the area is not too huge, we want a large district, okay? Because we know if it's a small district, some bad people, some people who have sinister designs might actually get elected and then only for self-interest. he says we want a larger district so that we get refined characters, but keep in mind that too large of a district might not be good. So we have to find the happy medium. What is the best thing for us? Now we will come to the point in the Constitution, you will see that they designed the system in a way where eventually every 30,000 people or more, okay, will have one representative. So they were trying to, in a way, really try to find, not have, how should I say this? They were not, and he says it himself, but he doesn't focus on it too much because he doesn't want people to think that he's against average common people. But he goes out of his way, they go out of their way, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, and then those who wrote the Constitution. They went out of their way to make this almost an indirect democracy. Indirect democracy, because we say it's a republic, but they wanted to make sure that when he says refine characters and refine the system, they wanted to make sure that people directly don't elect all the representatives. For example, senators were not elected directly by people. The president is not elected directly by people at that time. Judges, the same thing. The only people that were elected directly by people were members of the House of Representatives. So keep this in mind. I'm going along with what they say here in these papers. But when you look at the whole thing, they wanted to make sure that people's voices get refined. In other words, not everybody who doesn't know anything about what is going on in their world will have a chance to vote. So keep that in mind, all right?